What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Seth, and today we're going to be taking a look at Trove's U10. Yes, that's right. This is going to be the Geode Surface that the developers ended up showing off in their latest live stream. Now, there's some really interesting things to note about this biome and the different generation that it's going to have, so we're going to be talking about those things rather than all of the questions and answers and stuff like that the developers ended up talking about. I'll talk about that in a separate video. Now, you saw at the beginning right there, this is kind of just a little bit of a lore thing, but I do think that it's actually pretty cool. If you go to the Geode Hub right now in Trove, you can actually go all the way up to the top of the build, and you're going to end up finding these ships. Now, the ships themselves are going to actually bring you to the spawn of U10. And another thing too that's really interesting to note is if you ended up looking at the map right there, a lot of this is not really final, which is kind of weird considering that this update is supposedly done, but converting to console, clearly it shows that this update is just flat out not done yet. Most of all the final touches, but apparently the AI wasn't working in this build either. But anyways, the map that we saw 2 seconds ago showed a lot of different dungeons generating very close to one another, which I think is really, really cool and hopefully is going to, keep that idea bolstered that this is the end game. Like you can even see right here, these are 2 different dungeons right beside each other generated, which I think is the closest Trove can end up getting to an end game that we've all been waiting for, in that dungeons are going to generate more often. There's also going to be the addition of this big old dungeon that you see on the left side of the screen is going to actually be the new 5-star dungeons. So we don't really know much about these yet. The devs kind of drop hints at what they're going to do, but they don't entirely explain it. Of course, they don't want to give us any spoilers, even though it's not really spoilers. It's more like just giving us information to get us hyped about this update. It's supposed to be coming out. Like, seriously, I just desperately want new content, and also for them to talk about it. But we see that whenever they've talked about the Geode Surface, they always talk about 3 different sub-biomes. Now, that just means 3 different types of generating generations within the same one biome. So you see right here, this area is very different from the area that we started at the beginning of the video. So this is one of the sub-biomes. But again, I do like the fact that we look on over, just on the right side of the character, there was just so many dungeons, dude. And even over here, we have another 5-star dungeon. Now, a 5-star dungeon, near as I could tell, I think there's one that they end up going to later in the video where a 5-star dungeon actually has a couple 3-star bosses inside it. Now, when I talk about, oh, this is Trove's end game, the funny thing is that the only real thing that I'm looking at in terms of Trove's end game right now is tomes, because that's all that this game's end game really is right now. I don't think that the developers recognize that issue enough as they should. And fingers crossed that with U10 being added to the game, we're going to end up seeing some other type of, something else that we can grind for the foreseeable future instead of just an easier way of grinding our weekly tomes, Because the thing is, the devs did end up confirming in this live stream, which unfortunately is a very, very, very disappointing statement that they ended up putting out, where they blatantly admitted that they don't like when endgame people, or just people that are playing the game, get all of the new content right away. That's why they constantly, with every single update that they've put out this year, and even some in last year, have ended up putting out new items and new time-gated resources, so that essentially everyone has to start from scratch. They have, an even worse statement that they say towards Stellar Gear, and how it's not entirely useless when Crystal Gear comes out, for the simple fact that we're going to be able to loot collect Stellar Gear to get Pearls of Wisdom. Wow, that really makes it so that all our hard work towards getting Stellar Gear isn't completely useless, devs. Way to go. Now, again, the update isn't out yet, so we can't overly criticize them for making statements like this, because a lot of times, it'll end up coming out and then maybe it's gonna be absolutely awesome. But in either case, I'm hoping that the end game isn't just grind up to the new type of gear, grind all the new resources and new costumes and whatever else, and then once all of those are out of the way, then that's it. Then we're just grinding for tomes. Now, something that's interesting right here, you see them out in the overworld. 2 things end up happening. We can see that on PC anyways, Control A is going to end up being the hotkey in the bottom left corner to bring up the Trovian Atlas. That means that portals in club worlds and everything like that are a thing of the past. It is just going to be for vanity's sake, which, if, you know, some of you guys and gals might not be thinking about this, but that means that we're not going to have to craft and spend tons and tons of resources building up portals and clubs anymore. Suddenly their value just gets completely, you know, underwhelmed. Now, here's where they end up accidentally activating this 5-star dungeon here. Before I end up getting to my other point about what they ended up showing in the map. And you can see right here, see, now as soon as it's activated, they say it's all placeholder, but we got 0% progress and 60 seconds. And now we suddenly see 2 3-star dungeons, or 3-star bosses rather, ended up popping up. So I'm wondering whether or not it's going to end up just being a fancier version of Wave Defense. You know, maybe it's the exact same as a Cursed Skull, but instead you're fighting 3-star bosses. So essentially it means that we could possibly end up getting more gear. Again, it most likely just means that we're going to end up having better tome grinding for the end game. But that's the thing, is it's like I'm really hoping that once everything's said and done, we're not just back to the old grinding of the tome, because that's essentially the biggest problem with Trove right now, and one of the biggest criticisms that I always get from you guys in the comments is the fact that so many people quit this game because there's no end game. And I don't blame you. I'm a freak for still playing this game. I just love this game for what it is, okay? But I won't acknowledge, you know, I don't want to ignore the fact that there isn't really that much to do once you get to the end game and get all the gear. But look at all those dungeons they have on the map, dude. Like, seriously. So things get a little laggy because they're cheating to give themselves a little bit better stats here. Now, the other thing, too, that you may or may not have noticed when they ended up bringing up the Trovian Atlas earlier in the video is that the Geode Surface is not just a new elemental world. So we're actually seeing the Geode Surface be in U8, U9, and exclusive for U10, which means that the only way that we can end up getting the new gems is out of this world. So, you know, U9, obviously we're going to be able to get the stellar gems. Does that mean that U10 is going to give us more chances of getting these stellar gems, or are we just going to get the same gem boxes that we get from U9, but also with the added chance of actually getting ourselves crystal gear? Now, this is pretty cool. I like this generation, even if it's a bit lazy, because honestly speaking, this is just a Dragonfire Peaks biome just reskinned. But I do like the glowing trees and everything like that. Personally speaking, I would actually prefer that this was the Geode Surface. I don't know what person in their right mind, when they were designing the Geode Surface, I don't know what person it came down to where they're like, make it blood red, you know, like make the last biome in the entire game that apparently people are going to be spending hundreds, like, look at this, ew. Do you really want to be spending hundreds of hours grinding in this disgusting world? I mean, I guess it's not as bad as the fire elemental world and how bright and orange that is, but seriously, dude, like, they couldn't have chosen a more obscure and ugly looking biome. Like, I like the generation, don't get me wrong, and I kind of like the idea that it's an alien desert world, so it kind of feels like everything's dead, you know? But the whole problem is that, you know, on first glance it seems interesting, but then you got to think that we're actually playing this. The developers aren't. Obviously, they're just developing content, and because we're the ones that are playing this, immediately when I saw this biome, I thought, that seems interesting, but as soon as we get to that 100-hour mark of grinding this new area, I don't think I'm going to like it as much as somewhere like the Forbidden Spires, you know? Like, you look at biomes like that and they're beautiful. Now, these dungeons look great, and thankfully we can confirm that we can still blast our way into 5-star dungeons, because we were a little bit worried that they were going to end up, you know, taking our bomb privileges away in this world and thus forcing us to kind of do dungeons the way that they wanted us to do them, while the objectives still being very similar. Now, again, the generation of the plants and the fauna and stuff like that, you know, and the big old mushrooms and everything seems pretty cool. Another thing, too, that, you know, Joe just kept on hounding and saying over and over, which I think is absolutely true, is you'll notice that the biome looks very empty. Now, I know that the developers are going for that for the sake of it being like a desert planet, or, you know, it's kind of like the Geode Surface is being destroyed because the bad guys are here and, like, stealing all the resources and stuff like that. But it's like, dude, this is like probably the ugliest biome they've ever added to the game. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I like it, I'm okay with it, but it's like, dude, we're gonna just say it like it is. This is not that impressive. Like, it's cool. I like the fact that there's multiple dungeons, and again, a lot of the stuff that they're showing as far as the HUD is concerned is all placeholder. They could end up changing some stuff with the actual area here, you know, with the Geode Surface, but I honestly don't expect it, especially if this update's supposed to be hitting in winter. Obviously, it means that the only things that are left as far as development is concerned has to just be things related to the HUD and, you know, stuff like that, because all the hard code has to be out of the way just because of the simple fact that they would not have enough time to end up releasing this update in a couple months if it was underdeveloped. Somebody, as I may or may not have mentioned earlier in the video about the enemies not actually having their AI working appropriately and attacking the player, that wasn't really related to the monsters in the open world. That was more related to the 5-star dungeon enemies. At least I think that's what ended up happening, because I think the devs ended up talking about how when they activated that dungeon, the enemies didn't go for them and stuff. Now, what they're actually doing here, they're not just fumbling around for no reason, even though it seems like it. What they're trying to find is one of their favorite 5-star dungeons, and I think, you know, it's going to be perfect timing to actually end the video on that dungeon as we end up getting over to it, because it's going to be pretty interesting. Now, I do want to point out the fact that I am going to have 2 separate videos coming out. Well, maybe more than 2, but I'm going to have a video that's going to be talking about the stream itself and all the questions and answers we ended up getting at, because we got a few of them were quite bad and a few of them were pretty good. Over the next following weeks, they are going to be showing off more stuff about U10, so hopefully we're going to see a little bit more that's going to get us excited about it. The other thing, too, is the last time that the devs talked about the test server, it should be available to us sometime at the end of October, maybe early November. It honestly depends, but the fact is that we'll be able to test it for ourselves, and then we'll be able to actually, you know, talk about like whether these things are good or bad. And then honestly speaking, if you guys haven't already, be sure to sub and hit that notification bell, because I'm gonna have video tutorials on absolutely everything about it. More so, this is for people that, you know, for those of you that are on console and can't play it on PC, and then also for the people that have just outright quit the game but are very interested to see what they end up doing with U10, because it's all kind of still a mystery. But honestly speaking, I would not get my hopes up. Like, I think it's going to be cool. Don't get me wrong. I'm all about Trove having more things to do and more things to grind, and having just a normal update of just being able to grind dungeons is going to be way better than the last Geode update. But, you know, that said, is this going to end up being what Trove needed? There seems to be a lot riding on this update, where so many people are kind of make or break, where they're waiting for U10 to decide whether or not they're going to even keep playing this game. I myself personally, I'm going to keep playing it, and I'm sure that U10's going to be a blast, because again, I like the grinding. I think that the grinding is one of the aspects of Trove that needs to be further developed, you know, because it takes too long before they end up giving us new biomes and new things to go out into the world and actually attack and grind and stuff. Jiminy Crockett, when do they actually find this dungeon? Let me actually get to it in the video here. Okay, so here it is right here. This is really, really cool. We've actually got this kind of totem down on the ground, and then you look up and we got this gigantic, beautiful 5-star dungeon, which, I mean, it pretty much just reminds me of the Forbidden Spires dungeon. That's the dragon. That little weird eye thing, by the way, they did end up confirming as a dark heart that they're calling it, which I thought dark hearts were just in the cloud area, you know, cloud sky world. Which, the thing that's interesting too is that the sky world has something very similar to this, where you'll activate it and then you're on a timer to end up actually completing the objective, right? Which begs the question, is this really all just placeholder? Or is it just that they've done what they've done with every single update in this game? And why I say to not get your hopes up, because at this point in Trove, they've never added anything new in terms of content. All they've done, this applies to the classes as well, take a look, is they take pre-existing content and they just kind of rearrange it and then have it release as something new. You know, like we see it with so many different characters where they all end up operating very similar to one another, and even where this area seems like it's just going to end up being the same thing. So that Dark Heart, I would not be surprised if that is very close to what its final edition is going to be, and it's just going to end up being either a different version of a Cursed Skull or a different version of the Sky World Dark Hearts that you end up activating. Who knows? Time will tell. I don't mean to be overly skeptical here, guys. Most of all, the reason why I'm saying these things and being overly critical is I want you to not get your hopes up, okay? This is probably just going to be a completely unflattered end game area where we're just going to end up getting another difficulty. We're still going to end up getting the new stats and the new gear and everything like that. They haven't touched any of that stuff in this stream. It was just showing the biome. So I am still very interested in it, and I'm obviously going to end up having videos covering it as they end up showing up. Thanks for watching though, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, sub, hit that notification bell. And if you want to support me, you can always sponsor the YouTube channel with that join button down below. Buy some of the merch that's in the description, or buy some of the or not buy some of it. If you don't have any money, you can always check out the link to Gawkbox, which is a way that you can donate to me for absolutely free. Sign on and stay up, everybody.